I mean, the amount of spam, cold outreach I receive on a daily basis, like it's out of hand, right? And so as a recipient of that, I'm like, I do not want to be spamming the world more, right? So this is what I tell clients. What is it that you're promoting? Does it make sense for a cold outreach? And I think when you get the offer and the message right, you have a list and you know they're qualified, it can absolutely have its place. But if you got no plan, forget about it.
Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours.
On today's episode of Email After Hours, we're getting into the B2B side of the house. As we all know, email is a powerhouse for driving customer engagement and growth, but the tactics for B2B versus B2C can differ pretty greatly. And so to help us navigate this topic, we are thrilled to have Sara Kappler, the founder and CEO of Centric Squared, joining us today.
That's right. And with her deep expertise in CRM-driven marketing and her unique experience working across both B2B and B2C, Sara's here to break down the challenges and opportunities for small businesses in the email marketing space. From strategy to execution, she's got a wealth of knowledge to share on optimizing email campaigns, growing your list, and improving engagement. Welcome, Sara. We're so thrilled to have you on Email After Hours today with myself and Danielle.
Thank you. Warms my heart. What a lovely intro.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty, we always start off with an icebreaker. And I think all email consultants have like a favorite or a pet topic. So for you, Sara, was it the like nerdy side of email with all the numbers, testing, and systems that got you hooked? Or was it more of the creative side? Like what made you say, yep, I'm all in?
Emails for me. I know. I feel like this comes up a lot in email. Everybody has a path that led them there. And I love that email uses both sides of your brain, right? First of all, it's like every day is exciting, the creative side, the analytics side. But I think what really did it for me was working as a CRM consultant. I am the nerdy technical person, degree in bioinformatics of all things. And it was really when I was working with small business owners, we'd set up their CRM for the first time. And it was like a light bulb would go off in their business. They'd be like, this is my pipeline. These are the people. This is my marketing. This is how it works together. And it was so fulfilling to, give business owners this tool and see them be able to use it to, keep their business afloat and grow and discover opportunities. And I think that's what fuels me every day.
I reckon, if it's email nerds you're seeking, you've come to the right place. With plenty of them in this virtual room, and I suspect there's quite a few more out there in our sort of audience of 20,000 listeners. So speaking of which, you've been in the email marketing game for 7 years now. So let's talk about how the industry's changed over that time. And just as a little aside, 7 is also the magic number because Validity was born 7 years ago. So we found that
How about that? We share a birthday.
over that time, absolutely. You've been there with us. The industry's seen developments like the EU's GDPR, Apple's MPP. Now we're seeing the latest changes that we brought about by iOS 18 and bulk sender requirements. Man, the list just goes on. So when you compare your start in email marketing those 7 years ago to what you advise of today, what would you sort of list as the biggest shifts you've seen over that time?
That's a good question. And it certainly has shifted. I think there's, we all know it's gotten much more complex, right? It used to be Constant Contact, I want to say, and like MailChimp and some of these kind of clunky tools that maybe didn't do a whole lot of reporting and analytics or inbox placement or, any of these, I don't know. I'm just thinking, it just goes on, the complexity. So definitely it's gotten more complex, but in turn, I also think the tools have gotten so much better. The things you can do now with some of these tools, the reporting, let me remove bot clicks, like these little toggles. And you're like, how much time did I used to spend trying to do this manually? And here it is, just a little toggle feature. It's, they they grew together, right? The complexity and the tools to tackle it. So I think that's the biggest shift I've seen.
Yeah, I think the automation side of things is just so different, even compared to a couple years ago. And on so many of our webinars, especially with all of the recent changes around like bulk sender requirements, Guy, that you mentioned a minute ago, we were asked a broad question that goes something like, does this rule apply to B2B email programs too? So to start getting into it, do you think that one type of program poses greater challenges than the other? Like, is B2B harder than B2C just out of the gate?
I mean, it's like apples and oranges. I don't know if you're going to pin me on a favorite or most complex here. They really are different audiences, different strategies, different challenges. So I'm not going to pick one as being harder per se.
I think marketers would say it's all hard.
Yeah,
It's all
exactly. I think
hard.
it's kind of hard, right? Like, technically speaking, I think the lower volumes make B2B easier in some ways. But then also it's a disadvantage for testing and, landing on best practices and, so it's a trade-off, right? It's not like one specific thing. But I do think especially for B2B that, the hardest part for me is or for our clients that we serve in the B2B industry is really the content quality has just like gone up. People are not interested in, fluffy content. They need real meat and potatoes every time, right? And that's kind of where most of the work goes in the email program versus B2C that can get away with simpler, lighter messages, a nice creative. You can kind of go a little bit further with less, but then the technical side is also different. So I don't know. I don't have one that's more challenging than the other, but they're fun.
It certainly does. So maybe let's rephrase it a little bit, and rather than saying, one or the other, but are there any specific challenges that B2B marketers sometimes face that maybe aren't as prevalent in the B2C world? I'm thinking about things like, the bar to consent is lower in B2B. You've got to deal with corporate spam filters like Truthpoint. I mean, would you agree with those? And are there others which are specific to the world of B2B email marketing?
I think so. The biggest one I see that I'd love to dig in with you is this kind of lead gen, these cold lists and having to have multiple, domains or sometimes specialized tools to warm up the domain and then not send too many. And then hopefully you'll get the lead over and then you email them from your regular domain, right? It's like the infrastructure, I think, needs to be a little bit bigger. I don't see our B2C clients buying lists or relying on that type of, scraped data at all, right? And so it's just, I think that's a special can of email that's really specific.
Let's talk about it. We need to talk about cold emailing. So actually, I was telling Guy I use Reddit. It'll be like my morning scroll or whatever. I'll be going through Reddit, and there is an entire subreddit that is dedicated to the topic of cold
I
email, which
know.
is
It's a dark
both
place.
it's a dark place. I was going to say it's both amusing and baffling.
Yeah, right.
And most marketing consultants or email consultants, I think their knee-jerk reaction to cold email is don't do it, right? Don't do it. But there is a place and, to your point, a necessity for it in B2B marketing. Like, it's often harder to grow a B2B program subscriber base just inherently. So how should B2B senders do cold email in a way that's as closely aligned with best practices as possible?
Yeah, I mean, we have clients come to us all the time. Hey, we've got this list. Can you email them? And like you said, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh no. Like, no, what are we going to ruin everything we worked for? Ruin our deliverability? Are we going to be those people? And I'll just make a caveat here. I'm sure you're in the same boat, but as a business owner, I mean, the amount of spam, cold outreach I receive on a daily basis, like it's out of hand, right? It's like 6 to 10 emails every single day of that cold outreach. And so as a recipient of that, I'm like, I do not want to be spamming the world more, right? Like I don't want to be adding to it. So this is what I tell clients. I tell them, first of all, let's think through, what is it that you're promoting? Does it make sense for a cold outreach? And I think when you get the offer and the message right, and you have a list and they're qualified and you get the message right, it can absolutely have its place. But if you're just coming with a list and you got no plan, forget about it. So let's come up with a plan to tackle this. And two, I always tell them we need to do a test, right? Let's take a very small sample. Let's run the test. Let's see what happens, and then make the decision. And 9 times out of 10, that test is not it's not giving the results they were hoping it's going to give. And I explained to them, like, here's the risk, here's the trade-off of running this, versus not running it. And most of the time they abandon the idea because it's
I'm
just
so
not.
glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. I know. We try to talk them out of it. But, we've had cases where it's successful and, some businesses really only need a few clients a year to really make it worthwhile. And so when you're, it depends on the business model and the offer and the whole thing and where the email list came from. And of course, if it's been checked and if the emails are valid, like that's really important with a cold list. And we always do that, no matter what, because I'm not tanking their whole program. But yeah, it's a special situation. I wish there were, there's really like 2 branches of people who do email, right? And we tend to be in the I don't like cold email, and then other people are, we only do cold email. Look at our stats, and I think there's kind of 2 schools within the email world, and they're just polar opposites. I believe.
Well, I think in reality, there's probably some middle ground, which is, you potentially can do it, but if you're going to do it well, understand how those addresses are being sourced and how frequently they're being flipped.
And make sure your message is like interesting enough for these people. Don't waste their time.
Can I add one extra thing in there, which is, now that you all know I'm a subreddit, cold email subreddit addict, don't use the same template that everybody else is using. Like, just try not to, guys. It's like one of those things that's immediately going to get your message sent to spam because it is just a red
I've
flag.
got to tell you, Danielle, you're etching ahead in the email geekery states. Most of us are familiar with like cold pizza for breakfast, but cold email.
Gotta start my day off with a cold shower.
So, Sarah, back to you. I mean, we've already talked plenty about differences between B2B and B2C, but let's flip the script for a moment, because I feel like there's definitely quite a lot in common as well. And if you only think about the idea that probably 80% of global corporate platforms are Office 365 or Google Apps, and that's the same Microsoft or Gmail that your B2C counterparts are facing every single day. So are there any universal email strategies that you recommend that actually just work just as well across the board? Or do those strategies for success need to be different depending on whether it's B2B or B2C?
Yeah, actually our approach is very similar for a B2B or B2C client. And we would say it starts with the strategy, a really strong understanding of what you're offering, how it's positioned in the market, what are your competitors doing, what makes you different, what makes you unique, what questions do people have about your service or product. And, the kind of content piece is obviously different content, different timeframes to the buying decision, one more impulsive, one longer, different sales cycles. But, the actual content, answering questions, removing those barriers, to making the purchase, trying to kind of break down the big ask into smaller asks, so that we can show success, show interest, all that stuff is the same. And then after the strategy piece, all the analytics. Have they viewed certain pages? Are they maybe different lingo for it, but it's like, have they viewed a product page, right? Or Have they viewed your pricing and services page? Are they interested in booking a demo with you? Whatever those processes look like, there's different metrics, but they're metrics all the same that, you can then use to segment and feed into your targeted campaigns and your strategy. So I'd say the strategy is the same. The metrics are very similar, although of course they're slightly different, but and the automation opportunity is again very similar. You do the timing tends to be stretched out in B2B versus B2C, but similar concept and theory.
Life
So
cycle concept, right? Like
yeah,
there's still a life cycle that's
exactly.
happening in both. Yeah.
Exactly. And then technically, I mean, of course you see more Outlook in B2B or something, but most people are using the same 10 email providers, right? And those are going to be the ones to really QA for. Most people nowadays too are on mobile, B2B or B2C, so designing for mobile and making sure that things are, responsive and easy to read and a big enough font. Please, if anybody's reading this, make your font bigger. you know, those rules, that kind of design rules are really shared. Yeah.
I agree with all of that. But do you think that extends to sort of perhaps softer factors like messaging style and tone of voice? I'm thinking that Pizza Express will probably get away with going, "Hey guy, how you doing today?" Whereas I'd be expecting something a little bit more formal from HSBC my bank. Do you think the same applies across the B2B and B2C split?
Yeah, I do think more formal, and I think more value, and in general longer campaigns. We tend to produce for B2B clients because I think there needs to be more, like I said, more meat and potatoes in a B2B email than the 20% off. Are you hungry? Like the emails you can get away with in the B2C world. I don't know that many B2B, companies that can get away with that. There are probably a few examples that do it well, but most of the time it's, informative and educational and case study, a bit more content to them. For sure, the tones are different.
Yeah. And you mentioned just a minute ago metrics, right? So, whatever the type of business, if they're sending email, there needs to be a way to measure success. So, how do you recommend B2B senders measure success, and does it differ from B2C at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the engagement metrics are going to be shared. Your open rates, your click rates, your click through rates. And sometimes you even see the heat maps to kind of analyze where people are clicking, and all that stuff is the same. You got the same tools to monitor. Is this message interesting to people? Are they clicking on it? Are they taking that next step? And then all the website metrics, tend to be very similar. Have they viewed a page? Did they get to a specific high intent page, whatever that is on the site? So I do think it's important to, even if you're a B2B business, to be, have your Google Analytics set up, have your tags set up so you can see, people going through that funnel. Of course, the revenue metric is the tricky one, right? E-commerce shops, it's a lot easier to tell you, how many dollars were generated from this email. In B2B, there's usually, like I said in the strategy, we try to break down that sale into like smaller steps, bite-sized pieces. It might be book a demo or book a call, and we can use those as metrics too, right? Like how many discovery calls did you get this month from this email, and you can kind of piece it together that way. I think metrics are super important, and it's usually hard for the B2B business to figure out how are they going to track that revenue/sales piece. And usually what we do is we try to find those smaller steps along the way that are indicating interest and intent. And then a B2B company will take that list of, everybody who's downloaded a white paper, and they'll use that to do their personal outreach. That goes to their sales team. Hey guys, here's 100 people who've downloaded our white paper. Reach out to them, not in a canned, spammy, cold way, but in a personal way that, that invites them to take the next step. What questions do you have? How are you using this in your business? In a thoughtful way. And that can be, really effective.
I wonder, you just made me think of, so you would think then that like with a B2B email program, you might have more replies, like more direct response rate. Like, is there a specific piece or engagement metric, or really any metric that you really look at when you're focusing on a B2B program?
We definitely look at the reply rate. Tends to be much higher. Spam rate tends to be much lower, right? It's a very different ball game. Trying to think, it's tricky, in B2C emailing, you could have a reply rate, except the reply is unsubscribe, right? Like, and so your metrics are going to look like, oh, wow, people reply. But like, no, generally, you don't get interesting replies to email from a B2C email marketing program. However, the B2B side, it could be like, I'm ready to talk. Are you free next week? And poof, they have a new client signing on, and it can be really significant, those replies, in a way that you just don't see in the B2C side as often.
Do you think there is like a biggest opportunity that B2B marketers sometimes miss in their email strategies? The one that if only they could get it right, they would seriously elevate their results. Do you think there is a sort of black hole of an opportunity?
Well, from a content side, yes, I will say that. And we are preaching this to our clients all the time. So we tell our clients, look, this is email. You can say the same thing 6 times. It's okay, right? Like, you want anybody opening that email to know who you are and what you do and how to refer you. So these little sound bites, we call them, about your business and how to work with you and the service, we can reuse these over and over again, because what we're trying to do is drill it into people's minds, and you can get away with that in email. And most of the time, the clients are not doing that. They think one campaign, that's one message, and we have to remind them, yeah, but only 40% of people open that email, right? And only probably 25% of people scrolled through and read the whole thing. So you can say it more often than you think you can, right? And we definitely have that conversation a lot with B2B businesses. Or, are you sure we can run with this again? Absolutely, we can run with it again. We'll put a different spin on it, but it'll be the same thing. And it tends to be that consistency that really helps email, get them results.
Absolutely. And let's shift gear a little. So we haven't yet talked about CRM selection and how you guide your B2B clients, because on the one hand, of course, you want all the functionality, you want all the latest AI-driven wizardry and all the whistles and bells that you're going to let you do a super complex email marketing program. And then there's the cold reality that those same people that are going to use those sort of bells and whistles platforms actually have pretty limited resources in terms of time and capability, and frequently spinning plates in terms of what they're going to prioritize and what they're going to drop on the floor. So how do you balance that in terms of making recommendations for the right CRM fit for the right sender?
That's an excellent question. So, CRM consulting, that's how I got started. That's what I did for years before becoming an email marketing agency. It's a tricky one. I usually ask, have a conversation with the business, try to understand what they do. And then I ask them about their team. Specifically, what's the size of your sales team? That tends to be a big determining factor. Is it just one person? Or do you have 20 people here that are going to need to, keep the CRM up to date? And then 2, on the marketing side, what does that look like? Are you looking for an agency to support you with that tool? Do you have someone in-house? Do you have a developer in-house? Do you not? And usually based on their team structure and resources available, it narrows it down pretty quickly into like, are we going for the Cadillac that's going to need a web developer, or are you going for something that needs to be user friendly and, ready to go templates kind of thing? So that helps to make the decision. Of course, we have our favorites. So we work with HubSpot. We're big fans of HubSpot, especially that starter plan for most small businesses just to get started with it. We're a fan of Klaviyo for B2C and OmniSend as well now. Obviously, we have some favorites that we like. And, inevitably with the client, it'll be like, well, are you planning to do this in-house, or are you planning to have an agency do this in-house? Because you're going to also want a team that can run with the tool and that can make it work, right? And so that's going to be a factor. Yeah, but it's an interesting topic. One thing I always tell clients, though, is they're not using a CRM yet, is that it is 100 times easier to move from one CRM to a different CRM. Once you get the hang of it, the contact database, the marketing tools, it's going to be similar whether you choose, one provider or another provider. What's really hard is that first step to go from no CRM to a CRM, right? And getting the team used to using a tool and get shared reporting and all this data and, what are we looking for? What are KPIs? Like all those kind of conversations are going to be the hard part. But it's much easier if they need to move later. Obviously, nobody wants to migrate CRMs, but it's doable. If you outgrow something, it happens all the time. So yeah, but it's a tricky topic, CRM. Do you guys have favorite CRMs? I'm curious.
I don't. I just get ready whenever I hear that somebody's moving. I'm like rubbing my hands together, ready to get the warming plan ready to go. That's what comes to my mind first when I think of any kind of migration. It's like, oh,
We're about to do one ourselves, and it's going to be exciting.
exactly. And customer relationship management guy, you will know this. Sarah, you won't. But it's been at least a couple episodes since I've brought up online dating, which, yeah, poor guy has to suffer through once again. But I do want to talk about relationships. We talked about it kind of with cold email or just what a subscriber's expectations are when they're interacting with a B2B brand versus a B2C. And is it I guess two-part question, is it more challenging for B2B to build subscriber relationships compared to B2C? You think of when I think of B2C, I think of a really big, well-known brand that has an existing brand image that there's already kind of this relationship that exists even without that direct interaction. So is it more challenging to build relationships in B2B? And if you think it is, what makes it more challenging?
It's a very good question. I would probably say yes, it is more challenging. I think there is, like you said, there's an expectation from the B2C marketing where, the brand story's been established. You've probably heard about, the problem they solve or why they're in business or something about their kind of personal journey. B2B, I don't know. I feel like it's harder to get B2B business owners to open up in that way than B2C business owners and kind of provide that content or okay that content. They tend to say, no, it's not about me. It's about the service that we do. And like, that's great service, but it needs to be about you too. Like that's how relationships are built, this kind of trust falls sometimes. And I think B2B business owners are more hesitant to kind of have an open hand, in that sense. And so in that case, I think it does take longer. Yeah. It's possible. And then because fewer people are doing it, it stands out more when they do. So it can be really successful, but I think the mental shift that needs to happen in B2B business owners is harder to overcome.
That's right. This has been such a good conversation. And, as Danielle said earlier, we probably don't touch as much on the world of B2B as we should. And it's been fascinating having this conversation with you, Sarah. But unfortunately, we're going to have to start wrapping up. And as we opened with a quick fire question, so we shall close. So let me ask you, what do you think is the most underrated aspect of building a successful email marketing program, especially in the B2B world?
That's a tough question you're throwing my way. Most underrated of a B2B email marketing program.
I think you almost just, not to answer for you, Sarah, but I think you almost just answered it with your previous answer, which is, to me, you're right. I don't think that relationship building element comes in as often with B2B programs. And so standing out that way is
definitely, I think that, don't be afraid to put your personal self into your marketing program. And then I'll maybe add one more twist to the same concept. It's don't be afraid to, to consider your network at large in your email program. And what I mean is, people you do business with anyway, your vendors, your contractors, your team, their team, your email list when you get started with, with us or any email marketing agency might be 300 people large. And one of the first things a good agency will do is try to help you find more people that you can include in your email marketing newsletter. And that doesn't mean a cold list. That means let's look at the events you hosted. Let's look at your past clients. How can we get that base up? How can we find ways to encourage, a larger group in your email so that your personal message feels personal? And guess what? The people who know you personally, they get your emails, they're opening them, right? Like your whole email program wins when you find ways to get your engaged network into your email program as well. So I would say, yeah, that's probably the biggest opportunity.
Think about everything that we all aspire to achieve from our relationships with our customers. We want to add value to their lives. We want to make them look great in their roles, and we want to know that they'll actually recommend us to their peers and their colleagues and view us as their trusted advisors. And all of that you want to reflect in your email marketing relationship with them too. I think you absolutely nailed it. And with that philosophical outro, Danielle, do we need to wrap up?
There we go. Sara, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise. So for all listeners that are interested in connecting with you or learning more about your work, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Sure. So we have a website, centricsquared.com. You can contact us anytime. Be happy to support with your CRM-driven marketing project or strategy. That's literally my favorite thing to do, as you can probably tell. So,
Email nerds unite.
yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Oh, it was our pleasure, and I'm sure a pleasure for our listeners as well. And for all the listeners, be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. And of course, don't forget to visit senderscore.org for more resources to help you become a stronger sender.
And as all our regular listeners will know, Danielle and I love our Email After Hours guests. We're always looking out for new guests to feature on future episodes too. So if any of you out there like to join us for an upcoming episode, drop a comment, ping us on LinkedIn, fill out the guest form that's linked in the show notes. And in the same kind of vein, if you'd like to send in any email marketing hot takes, your questions, your queries, email us. We've got actually an address, emailafterhoursyt@gmail.com. Head to the link in the show notes to send us an audio message. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all again in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.
Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours, and see you next time.